Although we are sharing this year's event virtually, the festival is based in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, and we respectfully acknowledge the land on which we gather as the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk, whose culture has been lost forever and can never be recovered. We also acknowledge the island of Uktahumguk, Newfoundland, as the unceded traditional territory of the Beothuk and the Mi'kmaq, and we acknowledge Labrador as the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Innu of Ntsinan, the Inuit of Nunatsiavut, and the Inuit of Nunatuhavut. We recognize all First Peoples who are here before us, those who live with us now, and the 7 generations to come. As First Peoples have done since time immemorial, we strive to be responsible stewards of the land and to respect the cultures, ceremonies, and traditions of all who call it home. As we open our hearts and minds to the past, we commit ourselves to working in a spirit of truth and reconciliation to make a better future for all.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's session at the St. John's Women's Film Festival. Today's session is Film Education and Training in Canada, a New Generation. Welcome to today's session. My name is Steph Guthrie, and I'll be the moderator today. I'm a film programmer and multimedia artist and film educator, and I'm really looking forward to speaking with today's panelists who are all doing some really exciting work in this area. So I'll introduce each of the panelists one by one in greater depth, but I'll just say everyone's name, and if you could give a little wave. We've got Sophia Abdigir from Real World. We have Jessica Gibson from the National Screen Institute. And we have Doreen Manuel from the Bosa Film Center and Capilano University, and many other exciting affiliations that I can't wait to get into. So let's just dive right in. So Sophia, I wanted to chat with you first. Sophia is, just for our guests' knowledge, Sophia is the industry programming manager at the Real World Screen Institute and an arts and culture worker based in Toronto. She's specifically interested in the facilitation of diverse perspectives in the Canadian film industry, including 2S LGBTQ+ racialized identities. Sophia worked on Home Made Visible, a nationwide archive that digitized home videos and films to preserve the self-recorded histories of racially diverse Canadians, which garnered the prestigious Governor General's History Award in 2020. Sophia is drawn to works that challenge notions of sovereignty, complicate the human, and relish in the sublimely ugly. So Sophia, Real World, the film festival is coming up soon. You just unveiled the lineup like literally minutes before we recorded this session, and I can't wait. But right now, I'd love to hear about a specific program at the Real World Screen Institute, the Level Up program. Now, I understand it's creating some opportunities and connections right in St. John's, which is kind of perfect. So could you tell us a little bit about that program?
Yeah, so this program actually came out of, well, first of all, we have Access Real World, which is the largest searchable database. And so people of color who work within the Screen Institute, people of color who work within the screen industry can create a profile, and then people can connect with you via that. Because it's open, anybody can search onto it. So it's also accessible for allies who are looking to connect. And we were getting word from different productions that, they were using our resource. Paul Pope, who is the executive of Pope Production that is, producing Hudson and Rex, was noticing that his, crew is very white, and was reached out to Real World and through Rogers to create this opportunity. And so the Level Up program gave 2 writers and 2 directors the opportunity to work on the set. So the 2 writers worked in the writer's room as writer's assistants and then get to be on set for 1 week. And the 2 directors are working as director's assistants on the show Hudson and Rex.
Oh, amazing. So yeah, you're really getting those hands-on opportunities to kind of get your feet wet. And what kinds of participants does this program target? Who are you looking for to participate in it?
So this program is for emerging filmmakers, but because the Level Up required a little bit more experience, anybody who just had like maybe 1 or 2 works to show as proof, the writers were asked to submit a sample of their writing and then any kind of experience that they've had.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So Jessica Gibson is of the National Screen Institute. Jessica has built a successful career as a film and television producer and production manager since transitioning from her role in front of the camera as an actor to behind the scenes over 10 years ago. Jessica has extensive experience managing televised live events, including the Aboriginal People's Choice Awards and Indigenous Day Live. She was an associate producer on the award-winning We Were Children for the National Film Board and produced the short films Platypus, which received funding from Bravo Fact and Tides, which received funding from the Harold Greenberg Fund. In her spare time, Jessica and her dog Pepper are a volunteer St. John ambulance therapy dog team, which I love. Jessica, so I understand the National Screen Institute, the series Incubator program is accepting applications right now. So maybe you could start by telling us a little about that program.
Yeah, so we're accepting applications up until October 14th. It's a program that bridges, one of our flagship programs at the National Screen Institute is the Drama Prize, which hasn't run for a while. So we were looking to bring back a short film program, as well as working on a writer accelerator program. And in consultation with industry experts and producers, we kind of, figured out that the short films lead to feature films, and that's a notoriously difficult market right now. And so we decided to bridge a writer accelerator program with the short film program and create the series Incubator to kind of direct these mid-level writer and producer teams towards creating a proof of concept for a series that could live on TV or the web. And hopefully that will set up more opportunities moving forward than perhaps just a strictly short film to feature film kind of path would.
It's true, definitely easier to make a living making series, at least in Canada. Yeah. When folks get into this program, what are some of the things that they can expect?
So again, it's for writer and producer teams, and we will have two streams, one writer stream, one producer stream, running simultaneously in 3 different bootcamp sessions over the course of 8 months. And we're going to have industry experts as presenters. We have an amazing faculty lined up. My program consultant is Jeff Peeler, who is a producer in Winnipeg. We have Linda Coffey, who has worked a lot in the industry as a story editor and writer. Karen Lamb is going to be our director facilitator. So yeah, over the course of 3 months or 3 bootcamp sessions, we're going to have industry experts presenting courses to our writers and producers. In February, we're going to have a simulated writers' room for the writers, where we have Morwen Brebner, who's going to come in and lead a session, and everyone's going to get to workshop some of their scenes or perhaps their pilot, kind of whatever they need to work on, and then have a chance to pitch to industry experts. And then at the end, the culmination is creating this proof of concept that they can then take forward and use to pitch or use to apply for more programs.
Amazing. Thanks for telling us about that. So Doreen Manuel, MFA, is the 6th child of Grand Chief George Manuel and spiritual leader Marceline Manuel. She is a residential school survivor. Doreen is an award-winning filmmaker and the director of the Bosa Center for Film and Animation, and serves on the board of directors for Knowledge Network, Women in Film and Television, Vancouver International Film Festival, and Moving Images Distribution. She serves on the Motion Picture Production Association of BC Equity and Inclusion Committee and is a Telefilm Talent to Watch Fund partner. She is an advisor to the Telefilm Indigenous Working Group, TELUS Story Hive Fund Indigenous Edition, and Matriarch Advisor to IM4 Virtual and Augmented Reality Training Program. Doreen is a founder and instructor for the Tricksters and Writers Feature Film Screenwriting Program and a founder of the Indigenous Digital Accelerator and the Filmmakers in Indigenous Leadership and Management Business Affairs Program. And that last one, that is the one that I love to hear you expand on right now, Doreen. So this is it's a program at Capilano University School of Continuing Studies. And can you tell us a little bit more about kind of the inspiration for this program and what participants learn?
Yeah, it was after years of traveling back and forth across Canada and hearing from filmmakers from every corner of Canada, Indigenous filmmakers, saying that there weren't enough Indigenous producers. And then my own experience here in British Columbia, knowing that there aren't enough Indigenous producers, and seeing that writer directors were having to add to their own envelope and become producers, people like Loretta Todd, who doesn't really want to be a producer, but can't get her work made if she doesn't take, partially or fully put on the producer hat. It takes away from their ability to tell Indigenous story in the way they want to tell it. Because when you think about it in Canada, we don't really have a super strong defined Indigenous cinema yet, because we have been so colonized and oppressed, and by the Canadian government, but also by mainstream media and the parameters of what they think cinema is. So you look around the world, there's like Japanese cinema, Chinese cinema, there's Bollywood. Other Indigenous groups throughout the world have been able to form a cinema. But when you look at our history, and I spent like all day yesterday in class teaching Indigenous cinema history to non-Indigenous students, when you look at our history in Canada, you see a long list of things that have been impressed upon us that to kill us off, genocide of our people, things like the residential school, the pass system, enfranchisement, just a long list of different things that have happened to us. So of course, we haven't been able to get into the film industry until like around the 70s. And so we're playing catch up constantly. That's why you see such incredibly low numbers of us involved in the film industry. And the latest thing that I've been fighting is to get us into unions. The unions have been locking us out. And I've had Disney on my side and still had them resistant to allowing Indigenous people onto their union sets. So after hearing this for years, I attend the Indigenous Film Summit in Winnipeg every year, and I fly to Quebec to attend the Indigenous Working Group with Telefilm. Usually that's an annual meeting. Sometimes it's twice a year. But anyways, every single time, that's what we talk about. So I have been developing curriculum and teaching for 35 years. So I put together an outline of what that would look like. I also noticed that the only place you can study business affairs at a university is in the East. There's nothing being offered in the West. So I designed this program, and I went out and just kept talking and talking and talking and talking about it until finally somebody offered me some money. So the Indigenous Screen Office and TELUS Story Hive funded the first portion of it, and the Digital Accelerator matched those funds. So the Digital Accelerator CAPU that I helped found matched the funding, and we were able to start it up. We have an incredible list of the most esteemed producers, lawyers, and accountants teaching the program. And we run it on weekends so that working producers can attend. And we have a mixture of somewhat emerging to mid-career producers in this particular group. The reason I mixed it like that is because in the Indigenous community, and our true style of educating is we always have a mix. We don't isolate one group, because you'll find that the ones with more experience, like Ryan Cooper, are a role model, but also are sharing their knowledge with the newer ones like Kate and Red Crow that's come into the program. So we have 20 participants, and we did the first part of the sessions in the spring, and then we took the summer off. And that's also in keeping with Indigenous culture, because in the summertime, Indigenous people, even at, I'm an administrator and I still go out food hunting and gathering and getting ready for winter. or we go to celebration and ceremony throughout the summer. So we took the summer off, and the weekend before last was our first session back. So we go every second weekend online. So we have participants from all across Canada, and we even had one coming in from Los Angeles. She's got status in Canada, but she lives in Los Angeles, so she's been Zooming in with our meetings.
Well, it's an amazing program, and it's so true, the point that you raised about the, you know, representation among writers and directors being important, but if you don't have representation among producers, it can be a really, like, narrative sovereignty can be a real challenge, because you kind of need, you need folks who are able to get the films funded, who have kind of a really rich understanding of the story.
There's specialized issues that Indigenous people particularly face attaining interim financing. And that's why they have to turn to non-Indigenous producers, because the Indigenous ones, even the very experienced ones, cannot get interim financing. And the more I investigate this, I thought this was just a matter of because the producers' collateral was on reservations in some cases. But I also knew producers who live in the city who couldn't get interim financing. So I was confused about that. But after talking to a lot of non-Indigenous producers, I'm coming to realize it's more of an issue of institutional racism, financial institutional racism. That if you're Indigenous, you're not offered the loans. You're having to jump through way more hoops than a non-Indigenous person. You know, I've had non-Indigenous people be blatantly honest with me about how easy it was for them to walk in the door and get a loan the first time. And I'm just blown away, because they compare their financial situation at the time they got their first interim financing loan to, say, Loretta Todd or someone like that, who still can't get interim financing. And they were either below her or at the same place as her, and yet she can't get interim financing. That doesn't make sense to me. So the only thing that I can accredit that to is there's some sort of prejudgment on the Indigenous applicant.
Yeah.
So these are the kind of issues that I'm looking at beyond running Filmba. I have a lobby going to deal with those issues. I know Jesse Wente, I talked to him a lot. He's got his own lobbies going. We're both working at both ends of the country with many people in between us across Canada, all working to try to solve these issues for Indigenous people.
Thank you for the work that you've been doing around this. And that actually kind of segues perfectly into my next question. So now I'd love to kind of direct the questions at everyone, but just so that we don't end up talking over each other, I'll direct them first to one panelist. I'll say your name, and then we'll move on to the next person. So I was curious to hear from each of you about what are some of the kind of most common barriers that you have found your program participants tend to face that you're trying to design your programs to mitigate or address? And Jessica, I'll pass that to you first.
An interesting barrier that, like, I mean, for all the things that COVID has taken away from us, that it has kind of helped, is access to the program based on time and travel. And so with COVID, NSI, National Screen Institute, has taken all of our programs online, and some of the feedback we've heard from the participants is that a program that they may not even have applied for previously because they didn't have the time to take off work or travel, they're now able to go for, because they can stay at home. You know, maybe childcare won't be an issue, maybe taking time off work won't be an issue, because they can do it all from their computer, which is kind of lemonade out of lemons in this situation. And I know that we were kind of chatting about it before, just in terms of film festivals and running things online, and how that has changed things. But for access to some of the industry experts, people that might not have been able to come in and present in person, they're now able to make time to come and be a part of our program. So that's some of the positives that have come out of this, and something that we're kind of excited about, the good change that we've noticed in the last year and a half.
Love good change. It's always nice when that happens.
Yeah.
Sophia, what about you? What do you find are some of the most common barriers that your participants are facing in the industry?
I mean, similar to what Jessica was saying about time and access, our programs, we've been able to open it up and have more people across the country be able to take part in the programs, even though they're free. Again, there's always the cost of transportation, taking the time off, and just being able to fit um, that time into your schedule. Another thing was actually something that Doreen was mentioning was with our programs, we say emerging, but who gets selected is, you know, you have people who've been working in the industry for 10 years, 15 years, and some people who are just out of film school or have just worked on their first project, because for a lot of Black, Indigenous people of color, you can be working and have gotten the credits and have gotten the experience, but being able to take that next step or being able to be, greenlit or given the opportunity isn't there. And so that was one component of it, is like being able to access these things.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Doreen, is there anything you'd like to add to that as well?
Yeah, a lot of the programmers at film festivals don't understand Indigenous cinema. And so we have a really hard time getting into festivals. So for that reason, one of the things I asked Telefilm to do, they have that festival listing on their website. And if you've won an award at one of those festivals, you get elevated up in your status so that you can apply for the larger budgets. And all of those festivals, the majority of them have no clue how to accept and understand Indigenous cinema. So I asked Telefilm to include the American Indian Film Festival that's been running for over 40 years out of San Francisco. And they took my advice and they added the American Indian to their listing because a lot of Indigenous people apply to the festival. It's an amazing festival. It gives out awards and they're very selective, and they have a really good vetting system for the awards. So that's an issue with festival programmers, but some of the festivals are starting to hire Indigenous programmers, like Vancouver International Film Festival, Victoria Festival. There's a few of them. And there's a few that actually really understand Indigenous film, like Women in Film Festival, which is why I'm part of Women in Film now, because they always have a lot of Indigenous programming. The other issue is, one of the things that I mentioned is business affairs. Not enough of our people, this is something that a lot of my FilmBA participants have mentioned, that they really appreciate learning from FilmBA the larger budgets and about accounting and about laws, entertainment law, and tax credits. So it's filling in all of those blanks for these people and helping them to elevate their own status as producers, and being able to build a strategic financial funding plan. So what we discovered from one of the instructors did interviews with each of them and talked to them about their past productions, and what they found was that our producers were not applying for all the funds that they could for each production that they had. So they didn't know how to look at all of the funding out there and selectively choose the right ones and piece together an actual plan that would build an appropriate sized budget that would also pay them. So they weren't applying for all the funds that were available, basically. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to help them to not only build a festival plan for their films, but to build a strategic funding plan for the productions.
Okay, thank you. One of the things that that I think can be crucial for a lot of film training and education programs is who are the sort of institutional partners involved, whether it's the funding partners or whether you have programming partners. Because often these partners can also be part of the sort of connections that program participants end up forming. Sometimes they can end up charting the content of the program depending on the partnership. So I was curious to hear from each of you, sort of, what do you look for in a great partner for the programs that you run?
Well, I guess it depends on the type of partnership. If it's someone who's coming on board to create a program or to support a program, it's very much not just giving the funds, but also allowing those access to the members who are in the program. At Real World, we have the Producers Program, which is a Bell Media program. And the reason why we created this program was, again, a lot of racialized people are producing out of necessity, but they're not able to actually, a lot of the directors and writers are producing out of necessity, but we wanted to create like the next wave of like producers who that's what they want to do. But the thing about it is, again, being able to understand how the tax credits work, being able to understand line producing, and even resource sharing is it's not accessible. You can't necessarily Google and find an example of a line budget for a CMF, funding. A lot of that comes out of networking. A lot of that comes out of someone being able to share that with you. And it makes sense to an extent that, like, people don't want to share their financial information, but it creates a barrier in terms of who's able to then learn.
Totally. Yeah, that is a challenge. People tend to hold their information close, but it's like if you're just getting started with something, you need those templates, you need that information. Jessica, what do you, when you're building a new program or expanding a program, if you're looking for a new partner, what are the ingredients of a good partnership for you?
Yeah, partnership, mentorship, one of the things that we really strive for at the National Screen Institute with all of our programs, including the series Incubator coming up, is pairing our participants with great mentors. And that is also a part of the series Incubator, is internships and mentorships, one-on-ones for all of the producers, the writers, and the directors. We, as these people move through the program, they're learning a lot, they're absorbing a lot. One of the things you were mentioning about is templates, and I've seen just such generous presenters that do a business affairs presentation and then give us all of the templates, like with a caveat that please don't use my templates against me if we're ever working together in the future. But here you go, like, use this as a starting point, which is a huge barrier. And as somebody who's worked as a production manager in the past, that's a lot of what I used to do and what my peers are, oh, do you have something for this? Can you give me advice on that? And so getting that kind of leg up just from our presenters is amazing. And those are the people that, we look to for future programs. Like, would you be willing to share that with future students? But partnerships and mentorships are a huge part of the National Screen Institute, and something that we strive to make those connections with our participants, and something that we encourage them to nurture moving forward. And just a shout out to Doreen, who we've worked with through the Story Hive program, who's done mentorships for the participants through the Tell a Story Hive program, who we also work with at the National Screen Institute. I know that she's a valued mentor of ours.
Fantastic. Doreen, what you've developed many programs with many different partners. How do you kind of figure out the right home for a particular program, or which institutions are sort of the right fit to work with it?
I think in a lot of ways, I take an approach that includes my spirituality. I'm a traditionalist, an Indigenous traditionalist, and I don't take credit for all the things that I do, because the spirits and the Creator helped me to build everything that I build. And I cast my net wide. I work tirelessly. I have grown children, but I don't really have, I don't have anything that takes up my time in my personal life. So this whole work of working for my people and helping my people, it is my social life as well as my work life. Like yesterday, I taught all day. I had a half an hour off to rush home and get on a board meeting for the Vancouver Film Festival. And my life is like that on a very regular basis. I'm on all different sort of committees all day long. And so when I dream up an idea, like even the accelerator, I dreamed up this idea and I thought, wouldn't it be nice if we had this thing? You know, and like, you can't see where I'm sitting, but in front of me at my desk, I have babaloni shell, smudge, sweetgrass, and eagle feather. And so I have a little prayer altar. So I think it would be arrogant for me to say, oh yeah, I do all this stuff. I think that might have been almost like a prayer that I said, because it was like a really short time after I threw that out to the universe that somebody called us and said, we're thinking somebody should develop an Indigenous accelerator and we have the money to fund it. And I was like, what is an Indigenous accelerator? And they told me, and I went, oh, that was my idea. So I described my idea and they said, yeah, that's actually what we want to fund. We want to give you $1.9 million to start it. And I was like, awesome. Okay, let's do it. So, you know, it wasn't just me, it was a whole team at Capilano University, my former dean and our foundations department. We all got together and wrote the proposal. And it was in some ways easy to write because I'd already dreamed this thing. And then we established it. And then we went out to get matching funds, and that came easy too. And, you know, I always think in my life when things are difficult, it means I'm out of balance. Something about my intellectual, spiritual, physical, or emotional is out of balance. If I put it back into balance, and this is Indigenous teachings, I put it back into balance and my path will be smooth. And so the building of the accelerator was very smooth. The building of Filmba was very smooth because I had a thought, a need. So if something is needed, when I just start talking about it to everybody in my channels, you know, like I'm on all these different committees, I say, I want to develop this thing. And so because all of these people who support me and who I support, we work together as an enormous team in Vancouver, they hear about some funding or they hear about somebody who might be able to help me. And so they get in touch with me and I'm always getting information and sorting it. So I think it's just a nice machine that works together. I certainly have people that work against me, but I have such a great team of people that work with me. I just take that in stride.
That makes a lot of sense to me, you know, that right relationship with whether it's with a specific, an organizational partner or an individual person, that you can kind of feel that. You can feel that alignment and it emerges more organically. Thank you. So one of the things that I loved about this session when St. John's Women's Film Festival approached me about it was that the session isn't just, a lot of the time film training and education programming tends to focus on emerging filmmakers, and particularly when the focus is on supporting people who have been marginalized within the industry, there's often this emphasis on emerging creators. And that's not to say that emerging creators don't need a lot of support, but because we're dealing with this, there's incredible systemic racism in this industry that's been going on for a very long time. Other forms of marginalization as well. There's lots of people who've been creating in some capacity for a long time and they're not emerging anymore. But they still have not, because of these barriers, have not been able to kind of break through. So I love that the focus of this session is on programs that support mid-level or mid-career film professionals as well. And since it seems that all of you have kind of worked with both groups, I'm curious if you have found that there are particular challenges or particular needs that learners have when they're emerging versus when they're mid-career, or if it's pretty kind of fluid across these groups in terms of their needs. So maybe we'll go to Doreen first on that one.
Yeah, I think there's a real difference. Emerging don't quite know what it is that they need. Like, so I sit in all the Filmba sessions, not because they're emerging, but even at mid-career, they're not entirely sure what they need. Like what I stated that when Trish Dolman interviewed all of the participants, that's what she found was that they weren't casting their net wide enough for every single production. and that was hindering the ability to bring in enough money for every single production. So I sit in on all the sessions so that if they aren't asking all of the questions they could possibly ask, I ask the questions. Even if I know the answer, I ask the question so that the teacher can answer it for them, and it gets put on the radar of all the participants. And I think that's vitally important. Now, I don't have to ask as many questions in a group like that because the majority of them are, like Ryan Cooper, very advanced. He asks a lot of the questions and then starts off this frenzy of people asking questions, and then it gets comfortable. With emerging, I built the Indigenous film program at Caroline University into a decolonizing methodology program that lasts 2 years before they go on to the degree. And so in that program, we try to teach producing. We have 2 producing classes, one in year 1 and one in year 2. And they don't take them seriously. They treat the assignments purely as assignments because they've never been out there. They don't have a clue how important it is to know all of that stuff, to be able to go apply for funding. And then they go out there after they graduate and they find out, oh my God, there's a whole bunch of stuff I don't know. And I think they sort of tried to teach me. So they wind up coming back, and we're trying to teach them off the corner of our desks, which is another reason why I started Filmba. Because even applying for a story hive, once you get the money, there's managing the money, there's knowing how much things cost and managing your money properly so you get through the whole process. There's figuring out, how to get certain things for free. And there's a nervousness, I think, with emerging to ask for things for free, to know how to ask for them and to know how to bargain for them. And I think there's a world of difference, and I'll leave the rest of that world of difference to the other 2 speakers.
Okay. Sophia, what are some of the differences that you've observed in terms of the needs of emerging creators versus mid-career creators?
I mean, it's similar to what Doreen was mentioning, but I'll specifically talk about like seeking out mentors and like actually knowing what question to ask. There's like a hesitation to leaning on people or even reaching out. And I think sometimes it's not until people have done the work enough and realize how busy people are that like sometimes a reply someone isn't interested in you or doesn't know how to help you. They maybe didn't see it. So it's trying to give them the confidence to be able to ask for things and to go after this. Yeah, I think that's the main thing. Also, sometimes some language, I wish I could take emerging out of their mouths because I'm like, if you're a filmmaker, you're a filmmaker. If you're a writer, you're a writer. Yeah, I think that's the one thing I'll add.
Totally. Jessica, anything you want to add to that as well?
You know what? To be perfectly honest, I'm newer to this world of education. As we previously mentioned, I was working as a production manager producing short films, and so I've experienced kind of hosting interns that are emerging, and then jumping over here and doing the series Incubator, which is kind of more for mid-level creators. I echo everything that Sophia and Doreen have said, but I don't have as much to contribute to what those differences might be from an educator perspective, but I'm learning that as we go.
Yes, totally. You learn as you go. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Something to add. I think that if people are listening who want to help emerging, I think one of the things that's really important is to sponsor them to go to certain events. When I had first graduated from film, 2 amazing things had happened. One is a really experienced producer wanted to mentor me, but she had a limited amount of time and expected the mentorship to be mostly me asking questions. And I had no clue what questions to ask. So I got very little out of that mentorship. Unfortunately, because this is a really accomplished producer, and I could have got a lot if it happened a little bit later in my career. And the other thing that happened was a very well-known producer paid for me and another of my the other women that I graduated with to go to a Woman in Film event that we could never have afforded to go to. She bought us tickets and we went, and there was an award ceremony, and it was a great opportunity for networking. And, you know, as I sat in the audience, I thought, I will never be there. I will never get an award at a place like this. And then years later, Women in Film offered me an award and recognized me. And it meant, it's still today, it meant the world to me that she did that. And so, you know, there's a lot of us who now, you know, a lot of us who could afford to buy people memberships in different, like Women in Film, or in a lot of different other organizations, or to pay for them to go to different events or to even attend a film festival. And I think it's really important to sponsor emerging artists to help them get exposed, even if it's just to a film festival, so that they can watch films and understand what messages are being shared today.
Yeah, just even for that creative inspiration, which can be so inaccessible because festivals can be quite expensive. Yeah, no, I'm totally with you on that. And I think, you know, one of the things that that I think film training and education programs, I mean, they deliver very good information, but I think one of the other really crucial things that they also provide is that opportunity for building meaningful connections, authentic connections within the industry, right? Um, and whether that's mentorship or sponsorship, or whether it's connections with the other participants in the program who may be your collaborators in the future. So I'd love to hear from each of you about sort of how you build opportunity for that meaningful connection into the programs, and what are some, also if there's like an anecdote you want to share about a connection that was really fruitful for one of your participants or anything like that. I'd love to hear more about it. Maybe Sophia, if you wanted to start.
So recently, it was, you know, just yesterday, the producers had a mixers with Music Publishers Canada to meet with the women in the studio composers, and already there was connections happening that way. I think it's also for filmmakers and creators, they might not know how to go about finding people to collaborate with who are at their level. Like sometimes they would be looking for someone who's more established. And so being aware of other programs who are also trying to nurture the people in their respective field and bringing them together is another way of like creating those kind of collaborations.
I love that, partnering with other programs. Yeah, that's really interesting. And Jessica, how about you?
Yeah, I think I spoke a little bit just about making those connections with the mentorships and the internships, and nurturing those relationships and carrying them forward, as at the NSI. Like a huge part of it, and I had mentioned, like through Tell a Story Hive, we facilitate those mentorships. That's like our main piece of that, and we have gotten to know a lot of the industry professionals in Canada that are open and willing to share their knowledge and be generous with their time. And we focus on those folks to connect our participants with, because we know that those are the people that are going to be open to you know, having those conversations long after the program is over, if they ever need any resources, if they ever, you know, are going to be at a film festival and they can meet up, you know, because that will happen again in person. We encourage those relationships, and it's always really heartwarming to hear or to see the emails go back and forth at the end of a program with, like, I know that this is over, but please, like, I'm forever in your Rolodex, and you can always reach out to me, even if you need, you know, someone to watch your rough cut or fine cut or whatever, you know, I'm happy to give notes and things like that. And that's always really encouraging.
That's awesome.
I wanted to add one thing. Sorry, I just remembered the E20 program that we've had. Last year was the first year we started the 3-month mentorship. And so we paired each E20 with a mentor. And the beautiful thing that came out of it was, like, we were just expecting, when we were asking the mentors to come on board, we were asking them to give a minimum of, you know, 4 meetings over the course of like 3 months. And because the matches were really well, more than half of them are like, oh, I'm gonna be in contact with this person for a long while, and are really helping the people as they're like developing their projects. So for me, it's that whenever you see that synergy between two people, I'm like, because you know that is going to be fruitful. And even if they don't necessarily get something about it in the immediate sense, just knowing that you have a soundboard or someone you can lean on can really make the difference between people who stay within the industry and people who feel like there's not anything left for them. I think that's the one thing, especially as, you know, we accept some people in the program and some people might not get accepted, is seeing the upset by some people, because I know how hard they've been working. And if there's one thing I wish I could explain to people who apply to these different programs is there's always a limited amount of spots available compared to how many people we can accept. And one thing I keep noticing is just like there's such a talent. And so I wish I could respond to every single person individually and give them like a full one page of like why they're brilliant and why they should continue to do their work. But perseverance, because there's been one person in our E20 program who has applied for several years, and this is the year that they finally got accepted. So that's one thing I would tell people.
It's so rewarding to see those connections that form during the program kind of ripple outward and continue in the years subsequent. And I think you're right that a lot of it does come down to just matching the right people, putting the right people together in the right room or Zoom, as it were.
I wanted to add my voice to this question. We do something in the Indigenous Film Program. You know, I actually graduated from the same program that I wound up coming back and managing and redeveloping. And when I graduated, the coordinator, who was a non-Indigenous fellow, called me into his office, and he knew that I had already been a teacher. And so he asked me, what's wrong with this program? He said, you finished it now. What's wrong with it? Because he said there's a high dropout rate and I don't understand why. And I said, it's because you don't have any Indigenous teachings in the program that bring us together. We're not a family in there. We're a whole bunch of cutthroats just trying to get our own. So we may as well be any other film program anywhere in the world. This is supposed to be an Indigenous program, and you have nobody teaching and nobody pulling the program in together as a unit. And he asked me if I could develop the program. So this program, and so I did. I developed a class called Personal Professional Development, and it's got a lot of, because I was in social wellness before I came into the film industry, and I had developed a lot of programming for our people to deal with the intergenerational grief and childhood trauma that had stemmed out of Indian residential schools. I know that any programming for Indigenous people has to weave some components of our culture through it for our people to be able to come together like a family in a classroom. So I developed that course and I taught it all the way up until the time I moved into the director's position at BOSA, and then we hired somebody else to teach that course. But IDF is like a family. Within the first week, they start to you start to see it. You know, when you see our people leave the reservation and go out into the world, you see sometimes they get drawn to things that are not good for them, lifestyles that are not good for them. And it's because they're looking for family. You know, a lot of our people have come from broken families or come from families influenced by residential school, like my own family. And you seek out any kind of a circle you can adhere to. And if that circle is practicing behaviors that are detrimental to themselves, then that's what you adhere to. But if you come into a circle, like in the Indigenous Film Program, that is really healthy and good together, that's what you come into, a good family. And so in every program that I develop that feeling and atmosphere into it, and the teachings that go with it that teach our values as Indigenous people. And then that's what you come out with. And why that's really important for networking is if you don't have that and you go into a room where you have all this opportunity to network, you're not going to network because you're not going to feel confident in yourself. They come out with this confidence in themselves because what they're taught all through grade school is that they're no good. The curriculum doesn't teach Indigenous culture. The two classes I taught yesterday, there were a lot of high school graduates and they're all nations. And a lot of them came up to me and said in their entire life, no one ever taught them about Indigenous people till yesterday. And I've heard that from so many people that have gone through the public school system. So for Indigenous people, you can imagine growing up in your country not having an identity because you're not taught it in all those years you spent in school. So when they come into university at Capilano University to our course, I make it a point that they learn these things so that they can then build a foundation for their true identities.
Yeah, I mean, authentic connection is really difficult to cultivate if you haven't been supported in feeling your own sense of self-worth within your cultural context. And yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm very glad that you were there to sort of change the course of that class. So I know we're limited time left, so I'm gonna we'll do one more question, which is just I'd love to hear from each of you about any kind of we've talked about the ways that film education and training programs can kind of work toward building a more diverse and equitable and inclusive industry. But we know also that there's only, there's other things that training and education can't do, that we're preparing people to get out into the industry with the skills and the connections and resources that they need. What other changes are needed from other parts of the industry to make sure that these folks are being received and supported in the workplaces that we're sending them into? What are some of the other changes that you'd like to see to complement the amazing work that you're all doing? Doreen, I know you mentioned earlier about film festivals and the programmers often not having an understanding or appreciation of Indigenous storytelling. Are there other changes that you would like to see in other areas of the industry?
Yes, definitely. I would like to see a couple of big changes. I'd like to see the tax credit for one thing, either one of two things happening, either an Indigenous tax credit being formed for every single province and nationally a Canadian one, that Indigenous and for Indigenous, Black and people of color, so that we can even the playing field. Or I would like to see that for marginalized groups, they don't have to wait for the late release of the tax credit, that they can get it sooner. That's one thing. The other thing that I would like to see is I would like to see the unions treat emerging artists more fairly. And I've had unions admit this to me, to my face, that they practice nepotism. And every single one of them know that they do. They practice nepotism. They'll go hire their cousin that works at Starbucks before they'll go and reach out to a school who have a whole bunch of trained people who've invested thousands and thousands of dollars into their training. Before they'll go and hire them, they'll go hire their cousin. This has happened like way too much. And that's why you have a whole, you drive past movie sets in Vancouver. Sorry if I'm sounding really passionate, because it pisses me off. And you don't see color. You'll see like one, maybe two, but you don't see color. And that's offensive. And, I had Disney on my side, and yet the unions would not buckle. They did not want Indigenous people on their movie sets. But Disney was paying the money. And I eventually got a few people on, but it wasn't because the unions gave in. It was because we worked around a backward deal to get them on. And the other thing is, with equity and inclusion, I want to see a new position formed across Canada for equity and inclusion associates or officers or somebody, so that as we start to make some headway and get more Indigenous and Black and people of color onto these movie sets, so that they have a fair way of being able to communicate in case they aren't being treated fairly. Because that is happening today. They aren't being treated fairly, and there is a reporting process in place, but people aren't using it because it's not a safe process. We need to actually build a whole position, just like the intimacy coordinator position that a lot of people are accepting. We need to build an equity and inclusion position. Those are my 3 ideas. Thank you.
All wonderful ideas. Thank you. Jessica, anything you'd like to add?
Wow, that covered a lot. I mean, I think that Doreen really hit the nail on the head with the nepotism thing. I think anybody that has worked in the film industry, you know that like there's a really quick and easy path towards working on set in whatever capacity if you know somebody who has been there. So I think it really does come back to those partnerships and those connections, and then building those paths. I know that we were talking about what else has to be done, but focusing on the things that we can do and we can change, it is making those connections and seeing those ways that we need to get more voices being heard and forging those pathways so that people know who to call if they want an opportunity, and know who to ask and where to reach out, and you know, facilitating those relationships.
Yeah. Sophia, what changes would you like to see?
You know, it's one of those things where it's like I wouldn't know the steps to go about it, but it's an issue that one of our producers was dealing with. Was you know, she's Indigenous and wanted to collaborate with a writer who's based in the States, but because the writer is in the States, won't get access to producing her material. And if this was made, it would be an Indigenous story that is based within the basically the border doesn't make sense, right, for Indigenous people. And if you want Indigenous-led stories, there has to be a rethinking about that. One thing that we had was a co-production panel with the Aditi brothers, and they're the ones who created the South African treaty with Canada. But since the creation that they made it in, I think it was 98, up until now, it's only been white producers that have accessed this treaty in an African country. So continuously, you see the ways in which like Black, Indigenous people of color are the ones creating and making change, and then who profit off of it is not them. So that to go about shifting that, and I'm really like grateful to hear you know, Doreen speak and all the experience that she's had, because these things keep echoing. These are the same things that have been happening, and it's the same conversations.
Yes.
I just want to add to that co-producing thing. The reason why Indigenous people can't co-produce with Native Americans across the border is because the Native Americans down there don't have any funding. And so we're required to co-produce with countries who have funding, and the American government won't give them funding. So they have no funding to bring to the table. So we can't co-produce with them. Jesse Wente is also working on that issue in a roundabout kind of way, trying to test drive something. And if he can make that work, then maybe he can make this other thing work. So it's on our radar, and it is an enormous issue because that border shouldn't be there for us. There's the J Treaty says that it shouldn't be there. And yet it's the Canadian government that upholds the J Treaty. I can go across the United States. I have a social security card for the United States. I can go work down there anytime, but the people from down there can't come up here and work. So Canada doesn't honor it, but the US honors it. But they don't give their people and the Native Americans any money.
It's so frustrating, the many challenges that we've been facing for a long time and that are continuing. Before we close for the day, I'm wondering if there are any kind of trends that you're seeing on the horizon that you think are leading us in a better direction. And I'll just flip that to anyone if anyone wants to.
But a lot of people are talking about truth and reconciliation. I guess that helps to some degree because they get a little bit generous for a little while towards, you know, I'm talking about for Indigenous people, but I think that when people become generous to one marginalized group, they tend to be a little bit more generous to all the marginalized groups. So I think that that's one thing that's happening, that's helping a little bit, just a little bit. But I think it's an uphill battle for us all the time to help emerging artists, to help, and I always say Indigenous, Black, and people of color, because these are the territories of the Indigenous people. And we have been beaten and murdered so much that we should at least get to have first credit billing in our own territories. So that's why I always say Indigenous, Black, and people of color. But you know, it's for all marginalized people, I think that it's an uphill battle. And those of us who have a voice, we just need to be warriors and keep that voice going and not let up, because we speak for all the people who can't speak for themselves for whatever reason. So I see one great thing happen. I'm surrounded in Vancouver by wonderful people who support my work. Now, that didn't happen overnight. I've been fighting this for about 17 years. just in the recent years, I have a great team of a variety of different nations of people and a lot of settlers supporting me and helping me. It's still not enough because we're still not getting to the unions, but we still are working and nobody is tired. Well, maybe they're tired, but they're not acting like it. We work tirelessly. We just keep working. And I think that's the key. You just don't let up. If you want to see change, you have to fight for it.
Definitely. Sophia, Jessica, anything you'd like to add?
I just wanted to share some exciting kind of stats that we have at the National Screen Institute. One of our goals, one of our values is amplifying underrepresented voices, and we just celebrated our 35th birthday, and we renewed our commitment to that, and just did some alumni surveys, and as far as trends go, like 81% of our alumni are from underrepresented communities. I don't think that's something that we've published yet, but that was something I was welcome to share with you guys. 48%, so this is from the beginning of the inception of the National Screen Institute, 48% of our alumni are women. And in the survey, 91% of the respondents were still working in the industry after they've gone through our programs. So it's just really kind of validating to know that we've been a stepping stone on the journey of these folks that are continuing to pursue their goals and get their stories told.
That's fantastic, because as we know, attrition in the industry can be such an issue, especially for folks who are underrepresented and marginalized. Sophia, any trends on the horizon that feel or look good to you?
I'm actually going to plug a few things Real World is working on. We recently got a grant for the Women Feminist Grant. So we'll be creating over the course of 3 years a protocol guideline that looks at the way in which women of color have been represented within the Canadian media screen, and really look into that history and for something for industry professionals, specifically the writers, the producers, the people who greenlight this, could look at. And yeah, for people to sign up on realworld.ca for a newsletter. For other things, there's a few other things that are coming up, but can't speak about it quite yet.
Well, thank you for giving us a sneak preview. And don't hire anyone watching this. Don't hire your cousin from Starbucks to work on your production. Please contact one of these 3 genius folks or the many other programs out there where you can access really like qualified, passionate, talented candidates to work on your film set or TV set. So, well, thank you to the 3 of you for sharing all your insights and expertise and perspective. And thank you also to the St. John's Women's Film Festival and to everyone watching this for joining us today.